Welcome back. In this video, we are going to take care of the Highscore because we have prepared the Highscore here, but we are never using it. So let's actually take care of it. Therefore, I'm going to go over to my game manager and we have a text for the score and also for the Highscore. But now let's make sure that we have the same thing for, well, for the integer here. So I'm going to call this one Highscore, maybe without this capital S. So here, public int Highscore. So now, how is this going to work? Well, the thing is, every single time that we increase the score by 1, we need to check if the current score is greater than the Highscore. If that's the case, we want to set the Highscore with the current score, because at this point, the current score is the Highscore. Okay, so let's check if score is greater than Highscore. And if that's the case, then let's set the Highscore into the player prefs. And those player prefs, they are a way to store player preferences between game sessions and could store string, float, integer values into the user's platform registry. Okay, so that means that the values that we're storing with the player prefs class are going to be stored permanently on your PC. And that means that we can load them once we reload the game. So let's go ahead and set a value here. So we can set either a float, an int, or a string. So this is great to set your player preferences, for example, how loud the music is, then how difficult the game is, and so forth. So these would be things that you can store in your player prefs. In our case, we're going to store the score. So how that works is you need to define a key where you store that value, and then you need to define the value or pass the value which will be stored in that key. So you could say that the key is the location where it's stored and the value is what is stored in that location. So in our case, we can just call this one Highscore, for example, and it's important that you write it exactly the same way in your setting as well as in your getting method. Okay, we're going to see what that means in a second. So here, I'm just going to save the score there. So that means inside of the location called Highscore, I'm going to store the score on my PC. And now I can also make sure that my Highscore text property is set to be whatever the score is at that point. Okay, so that is how we can make sure that we are setting the score once it is increased. So every single time that we are increasing our points by slicing another fruit, it is checked if we currently are higher than the Highscore. But now we also need to make sure that the Highscore is gotten at one point. Okay, so let's create a new method here. Private void get Highscore. So I'm going to call this one, and this will now allow me to set the Highscore. We can set the Highscore by getting it from the player prefs. And here we don't set the int, but we get the int this time. Okay, so get int, and now we just need to say at which key the value was stored. And here it's always good to copy and paste just to make sure that we have written it exactly the same way. So that will now give us the Highscore, and whenever we are getting the Highscore, I believe it makes also sense to set the Highscore text to be whatever we have inside of Highscore. And of course, as this is an integer, so this Highscore, you see int is an integer, we need to make it a string because the Highscore text requires a string. Now that by itself will give us the Highscore, but what we actually want is we want to make sure that it's going to say something like best : empty space and then the actual Highscore. So maybe we want to do the same thing down here where we are setting the score here using the score to string. Okay, so this is going to set our score, increase the score, and so forth. Here we can get the Highscore. Now we need to make sure that we actually get this Highscore. And a good moment for that would be the start method. So whenever we start the game and our game manager is loaded, let's load the Highscore. All right, at this point, let's save our script and let's get back to Unity. Okay, so let's test the game. I had activated this game over panel for testing purposes. So now let me deactivate it once again and let's run the game. And let's increase our score. We can see our best score up there. We restart the game and the best score is still up there. And once we increase it, you can see it's increasing also. Now let's lose. So let me sure that I'm going to lose. Oh, I missed the first bump. The second bump, I got it here. So you can see now, let's replay. We can see our score is reset, but our best score is at 54. Now let's restart the game. And we will see that the 45 is still there. So our high score is still stored. And now we have a way to store our high score permanently and also display it. Okay, so that's it for this video. See you in the next one.